Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome back to Outlaws and Gunslingers with your hosts Bang and Dang and the second episode of our Mafia series. We told you last time as we went through a quick history of the entire Mafia up until today that the first known Mafia guy that came from Sicily was none other than Giuseppe Morello, also known as the Clutch Hand or simply Joe Morello when he came to America. If you guys don't know what we do here, think of it as a kind of like a audiobook / reaction.
Right.
What we do is we pretty much go through these guys' stories and
For the first time.
some of them for the first time, yeah, and then we kind of react to what's happening, and sometimes we'll riff off to, well, we'll be like, what the hell? Why'd that happen? So yeah, think of it as like an audiobook / reaction where we're going to read about all these guys' stories and all the stuff that happens and react to it, pretty much. We're not your traditional true crime podcast. We're not doing journalistic work and hunting down people and
Not at all.
putting hours and hours and hours and hours in research. We're just simply reading some stories and reacting to it. So if that's your thing, cool. If not, then go find another true crime podcast that is boring. So,
But we will guarantee that you'll get every bit of information that is possible to get from these people.
true.
So,
It's not like you're right. I mean, you're getting all the facts and everything that's happening. But so there you go. With that being said, Giuseppe, the Clutch Hand Morello, born May 2nd, 1867. He's also known as the Old Fox, like we said, was the first boss of the Morello crime family. Later top advisor to Giuseppe Joe the Boss Masseria. Morello was born 1867, like I said, with a severely deformed right hand with only an elongated pinky finger bent grotesquely inward. So think of it like he was like,
dang, was there some incest going on in his family?
he had a little baby hand. He got a strong hand. This is my strong hand.
Watch out, the fanny's coming through.
And I stuffed the shit out of it. Well, like I said, his name's also, they called him Joe. And as a result of his grotesquely shaped hand, he was called the Clutch Hand, Little Finger, or One Finger Jack. His father, Calogero Morello, died in 1872, and his mother, Angelina, remarried one year later to mafioso Bernardo Terranova. Joe Morello's stepfather and mother had 4 children together, Nick, Ciro, Vincent, and Salvatrice.
Salvatrice Terranova married a wicked man named Ignazio Lupo, the Wolf Saeta, who later in America, along with Joe Morello and Nick and Vincent Terranova, formed the hated and much feared Black Hand.
The Black Hand. We learned a little about them.
Yeah. For all practical purposes, Saeta and Morello had equal power in an organization. While still in Corleone, Joe Morello and his 3 half-brothers were introduced by Bernardo Terranova into the Corleonese Mafia, sometimes called the Fertuzzi,
The Fertuzzi.
where they made their bones by killing whomever the Corleonese bosses said needed to be killed.
Well, hitmen, pretty much. Henchmen.
They made them. One such victim was Giovanni Vella, the head of the quasi-police force called the Guardi Campresti, or Field Guards, which patrolled Corleone on foot looking for Corleonese mafia members up to no good.
Up to no good. Well, 1888, Joe Morello was arrested for the murder of Vella, but then some weird stuff started happening. First, the murder weapon that Joe had on him when he was arrested oddly disappeared from the local police lockup. The gun was snatched by an enterprising carabinieri, which is a police, who paid molto lira to do so. I'm guessing that's another gang or something. Secondly, there was the slight problem with a woman named Anna Di Puma, who claimed she saw Joe Morello shoot Vella to death in a darkened alleyway. Oh, Anna, you shouldn't do that, because 2 days after Vella's demise, Anna Di Puma was sitting outside a friend's house having a nice conversation when a gunman walked up behind her and shot her in the back, killing her instantly.
Oh, my.
Joe Morello was set free with no smoking gun and no witnesses to testify.
Well, I mean,
that's how you do it. They were doing that shit even in the 1880s, man.
jeez.
Gotta get rid of it.
Morello then decided it was time for him to start making some big money.
Big money.
By dealing in the sale of funny money, or counterfeit. This worked out for a while until 1892 when Morello was arrested with a fistful of phony cash. Rather than face charges in Sicily, Joe Morello thumbed his nose at the Italian authorities and absconded secretly to America, settling in the Lower East Side of New York. Although Morello was in the United States, he still was tried in absentia and sentenced 6 years in solitary confinement. Morello was an oceans away from his punishment, and he was ready to mark his name in the sands of America.
Well, soon after Joe escaped from Sicily and landed illegally in America, Bernardo Terranova, his wife Angela, and 6 of their children boarded the ship Alsatia, and headed for America to join Joe. Also with them was Joe Morello's wife, Lisa Marvellesi, with her 2-month-old baby, Caligero, who was named after Joe Morello's blood father. Oh, look at that. They passed, as all immigrants did at the time, through Ellis Island and entered America legally.
Right.
While most immigrants came to America with only the clothes on their backs and few measly bucks in their pockets, the Terranovas brought the stunning total of 18 pieces of luggage filled with the finest clothes and who knows how much money. Yeah, man, they were mob guys.
Right.
Even though this certainly was not against American law, it should have raised some eyebrows among the Ellis Island officials. Right, because, every single person passing through these that are immigrants are coming with nothing, and these guys are just like, excuse me.
Right.
Can I get a cocktail?
And if they had money, they would have came in on like a big boat with all other people that have money.
Right.
Like the Titanic or something.
Bernardo listed his occupation as a laborer, even though he was a well-known murderous mafioso in Corleone. Right. I mean, but it is the 1800s. It's not like you got APBs on these guys.
Right. Like, are you sure you're not that guy from Italy?
Right.
So now they're in America. Morello and Terranovas tried their best to fly under the radar of American law. Even though there was no communication between the Sicilian police and their American counterparts, there was still a 3-year grace period after which an Italian immigrant became immune to deportation.
Oh, really?
They had to keep their nose clean for 3 years.
Long time.
Terranovas joined Morello and settled in Manhattan's Little Italy on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, obviously.
Right.
At first, they tried to make a living in a series of legal jobs, including plastering, just carpenter work or whatever.
Laboring.
Right.
Yeah, we know that's not going to last. Well, when Joe first arrived in New York, he tried to earn an honest living, but this was all a front for his illegal activities like bookmaking and loan sharking. Soon flushed with money, Morello invested in several small businesses, including a coal store, several bars and restaurants in Little Italy, and as far north as 13th Street, all of which soon folded for quote-unquote lack of business. We know what happened there.
Right.
He got the insurance money for that shit.
Yeah.
1899, Morello returned to what he knew best, counterfeiting. This time, the counterfeiting of the American money.
Ooh, it's a little harder.
I would say, probably.
Well, Morello got a small printing press, and he put that in his apartment at 329 106th Street in what was known as Italian Harlem.
Wow.
He printed up mainly $2 and $5 bills, obviously, the most commonly used American currency. To spread these bills around New York City, Morello hired several men, both of Italian and Irish. The New York City police got wind of the counterfeiting ring, and several of Morello's workers were arrested. A man named Jack Gleason, not the comedian, obviously,
Jackie Gleason to the moon.
immediately flipped and gave the police Morello as the operations mastermind.
Kill him.
Morello was then arrested, but since no one wanted to testify against him, and he was only found to have legal tender on him,
Right.
and there's nothing they can do, so guess what?
Gotta go.
Walked out of jail without even being indicted. But this embarrassment taught Morello a severe lesson he'd never forget. Never work closely with anyone except men he knew from Sicily.
Oh, what does that go to? Now we're working on something here.
Yep.
Well, it's unclear whether Joe Morello or his buddy Ignacio Saeta originally started the Black Hand extortion scheme in America. What is clear that around 1898 or 99, both Morello and Saeta, along with the Terranova brothers Vincenzo and Ciro, began terrorizing local Italian businessmen of some means by sending them a Black Hand or La Mano Nera extortion letters. These letters threatened local businessmen with bombing their businesses or even death if the businessmen didn't immediately cough up some very substantial cash.
All right.
On the bottom of the extortion notes was the imprint of a black hand, you guessed it, which was made by a hand dipped in black ink. What?
Whoa.
I was going to say, but due to the inroads law enforcement had made with fingerprinting at the time, the black hand was later drawn and said, yeah, you probably don't want to put your prints all over it.
Boom, you never catch me.
Right. Or, geez, like wear a glove or something.
All right, you might as well sign in blood.
Right. If the businessman did not comply with the note's demands, he would indeed get his business bombed, and sometimes he was tortured and even killed in the infamous murder stables located at 323 East 107th Street in Harlem.
If you want people to think you're serious, some people are going to have to die or get seriously hurt.
Yeah. You got to start buzzing some kneecaps.
Wow, an incident like this occurred in 1905. And the unfortunate victim was a butcher named Gaetano Costa, who received a black hand letter demanding $1,000.
That's a lot of money in 1905, folks.
The letter instructed Costa to put the money into a loaf of bread, then hand the loaf of bread to a man who came into his butcher shop the next day and waved a red handkerchief in the air. Costa refused to give in to the extortion. 2 days later, 2 men marched into his butcher shop, shot him dead.
Should have just did it, man. Well, Morello added an innovative new wrinkle to the Black Hand extortion scheme to assure his collections. He would mail an extortion letter to his victim, then wait near the victim's door as the postman delivered the letter the following day. While the victim was reading it, he would mysteriously appear in the victim's store. Like, noticing the consternation on his victim's face, Morello would inquire about the cause of the victim's distress.
Oh.
Knowing Morello's high status in the local mafia, the victim would hand him the letter and beg him to intercede with whoever had sent the letter. You don't know it's him.
Right.
And maybe reduce the price, if not eliminate the payment completely. Morello would take the letter and tell the victim he would find out who had sent it and what could be done about it. This guy, dude.
Wow.
Jeez.
Well, Morello had sent the letter himself, obviously.
Of course.
The demand could not be withdrawn completely.
Right. He's like, no, I couldn't get it down to 0, but you're going to have to pay at least $200 or something.
Right. And now with Morello in possession of the letter, the victim could not have any evidence to give the popos.
This guy.
Well, in a few days, Morello would return to the victim's store and tell a tall tale of how he could reason with the extortionist and reduce the demand to a smaller amount. At this point, the victim was only too glad to still be alive and his store still intact. And so this would lead the victim to happily pay the sum to Morello, who would then in turn put it in his pocket. And it would put the matter to rest once and for all.
Once and for all until...
With the store owner thinking, hey, I'm paying off these guys.
Until the next month comes around.
Right.
Sayeda and Morello also ran a counterfeiting operation originated in the sleepy upstate town of Highland, New York, 50 miles from New York City. Sayeda was the hands-on partner while Morello continued operating their rackets in New York. Yet, the Black Handers had an enemy named Deputy Inspector William Flynn.
Oh, Deputy Inspector.
Flynn was an expert detective, but a little on the talkative side, especially when he was talking about himself. Flynn also knew that Morello, Sayeda, and his gang were running an extensive counterfeiter operation, but at the present time, he could not uncover where the bills were being printed.
Right.
But he was sure it was not being done in New York, which he was right. Look at that.
Wow. Employing several undercover policemen, Flynn had what he called a life surveillance put on Morello, which was not exactly the proper term. Because of the lack of manpower, Morello was only intermittently observed.
That's right.
Still, Morello was certainly on Flynn's radar.
Early 1908, Sayeda began a large-scale fraud scheme using his wholesale network of grocery stores in New York. He imported olive oil and other Italian delicacies from Italy.
Nice.
Cool. Sayeda operated out of his Mott Street store. Other grocery stores throughout the city were owned by Sayeda's Confederates, active in the Black Hand extortion and a nationwide counterfeiting operation. November 1908, Sayeda filed for bankruptcy concerning his import business. His Mott Street store was seized under the orders of the U.S. court. When the receivers entered the store to examine the books, they found only $1,500 in inventory and over $100,000 in debt.
Oh, my.
Wow.
Well, they also discovered that that the week before Sayeda disappeared, he had made over $50,000 worth of purchases. But those goods were nowhere to be found, and the sellers were now stiffed on the $50,000. This is called the standard bust-out scheme, supposedly, where you buy as much merchandise that you can on credit, sell the merchandise in the black market, pocket the cash, and then file for bankruptcy.
Yep. Well, Sayeda's cohorts in the scheme also filed for bankruptcy around the same time as he did. Antonio Passananti, who had been sent to kill a New York cop named Joe Petrosino, owned a wholesale wine business in Brooklyn. He used the bust-out scheme to close his business and claim bankruptcy as well. Well, when Passananti's store was investigated, they found records that he had given huge sums of money to Sayeda before they both disappeared. The New York Times reported that a dozen other Italian dealers had also gone into the wind, resulting in total liabilities close to $500,000. Dude.
Nice. Look at that. Look at that shit. Well, November 1909, with Petrosino already dead.
All right, he's dead.
Sayeda returned to New York City with his lawyer, Charles Barbier, in tow. Sayeda marched into the bankruptcy receiver's office and told a tall tale of why he had suddenly left New York City. He said he had been sent a Black Hand extortion letter, and fearing for his life, he fled to Baltimore, and then Buffalo, and that's where he stayed before spending the final weeks at his brother's grocery store in Hoboken, New Jersey. Sayeda hired a bunch of lawyers to fight his creditors, and he returned to his old haunts in New York City, socializing with Morello and the other Black Handers. Sayeda did not know that Inspector Flynn had his men following Sayeda as well. One day, they followed him to Highland, and bingo, now they knew where the counterfeit bills were being printed.
Well, Flynn now had enough evidence to arrest Morello, Sayeda, and several other Black Handers, who were in on the counterfeiting operation originated in Highland. However, Flynn did not want to arrest the minor players first because he feared Morello would be tipped off and go into hiding. Yeah. From his surveillance on Morello, he knew that he lived in a tenement building on 207 East 107th Street. However, Flynn did not know in which apartment he resided. One of Flynn's operatives was 17-year-old Thomas Callahan, who had been posing as a shoeshine boy on 107th Street.
Little shoeshine boy. 15th November 1909, Callahan spotted Morello, Vincenzo, Terranova, and another man heading down the block toward their building. Without an exact plan in place and wanting to know which apartment the mafioso inhabited, Callahan immediately ran into the 4-story building. The building now was totally dark, since the janitor had turned off the interior building lights.
Well, that's not safe.
After Callahan stopped on the second floor of the tenement, he heard the 3 men enter the building and began walking up the stairs toward him. Callahan slithered quietly to the top floor, not knowing exactly what to do. He's like, oh shit, I knew. Should have thought this through. He didn't realize that the black handers, who were always armed, might continue upwards and see him trapped on the 4th floor, and for no reason for being there.
He could have just sat down and been like, I'm just chilling, man.
Drunk.
Drunk. Callahan started heading down the stairs like he had nary a care in the world. Between the 3rd and 4th story landing, Callahan came face to face with the clutch hand.
Oh, no shit.
Morello looked puzzled. Morello stared Callahan straight in the eye and said, "Scusa, please."
Scusa.
Scusa, please. They probably did. That's how they said it. Scusa. Scusa, please. Callahan moved to one side of the stairs, and without saying another word, the 3 men passed him and continued to the top floor. Callahan sped down the stairs and out of the building, expecting a bullet in the back, his heart pumping like a runaway train.
I can just imagine that.
As he hurried to where the other agents were waiting, Callahan turned around to see if he had been followed out of the building. He hadn't.
They didn't get
He still don't know what apartment. Yeah, now they know they're on the 4th floor.
Right.
Are they just going to kick in every door up there?
Flynn knew it was time for him and his crew to make their move. Within minutes after Callahan had exited 207 East 107th Street, Flynn's agents had surrounded the building, their eyes on the 4th floor window. Light was still on. Every so often, they could see one of the men in the room pass the window, but not once did any of the mafioso look out the window. That was a lucky break for Flynn. It wasn't until 11 a.m. the next morning that the agents made their move.
Jeez. With 6 of his best men, including Callahan, Flynn... Oh, he was only 17. Flynn quietly entered the building and climbed the steps. He had a skeleton key in his possession, which could open virtually any lock.
Oh, no.
When they reached the door of the 4th floor apartment, Flynn pressed his ear to the door and heard no movement inside. He quietly inserted the skeleton key, unlocked the door, and with their guns pointed out in front of them, Flynn and his agent slowly entered. The door opened into the kitchen, but nobody was there.
Uh-oh.
They opened the door to one of the bedrooms. There was Morello, dead to the world, snoring lightly. His half-brother Vincent was on a second bed beside him and sawing wood, meaning snoring.
All right. Well, Flynn later told the press that we had no intention of waking them until we were sitting on them.
Right.
Flynn gave the word to his men to pounce, and in seconds, both Morello and Vincent Terranova were in custody. Under Morello's pillow, the agents found 4 loaded revolvers.
Why do you sleep? I would never do that. I don't care.
Under Terranova's pillow, they found 5. Certainly, if they were not sleeping, the 2 men would have put up a hell of a fight.
Yeah, I think so. Well, the noise the agents had made in snagging the 2 mafioso awakened the rest of the apartment's inhabitants. 3 half-dressed men exited the bedroom in seconds, screaming and cursing in Italian. Then Morello's wife, Lena, emerged from a 3rd bedroom. Why was there not... It's weird. Her infant daughter in one arm and a huge knife in the other.
Oh, shit.
It took 2 men to subdue her and relieve her of her weapon. Still holding her baby tight and incensed that the agents were just doing their job, Lena spat on them in defiance.
Oh, you know how it is.
It's like in Goodfellas. She's like, I never understood why these ladies would spit on their own floor. I invited them in, asked them if they wanted any coffee.
Well, the other 3 guys tried to create a diversion so that certain evidence would be hidden and eventually destroyed. One of Flint's men spotted one of the Italians stuffing several letters into Lena Morello's apron, which they sprawled on the kitchen table. Thinking no one was watching, Lena grabbed her apron, pulled out several letters, and stuffed them into her infant's clothing.
Oh, jeez.
Holding the baby in one arm, Lena tried to leave the room. 2 agents pounced on her, and a fierce skirmish ensued. Whoa, damn.
You got a kid.
A fierce skirmish ensued. With Lena kicking, screaming, and cursing, Flynn was able to search the infant's clothing. He found 3 letters in the infant's still clean diapers. Thank you.
Right.
And several more in her apron. They were all black hand letters waiting to be sent to their intended targets. However, Flynn's agents did not fare too well in their battle with Hellcat Lena, as was evidenced by the several dozen cuts and bruises on their battered bodies. Hellcat Lena.
Hellcat Lena. Well, Flynn's agents fanned out and searched the other apartments at the building. When the dust settled, they had arrested 14 black handers and counterfeiters. Some men were both. As an added bonus, $3,000 in fake $2. Oh shit! And fake $2 bills was found in a paper bag under the bed in the apartment occupied by the Vassi brothers. It was a fine roundup for Flynn, but one big fish was nowhere to be found: Ignacio Lupo the Wolf Saeta. As the search for him continued, other members of Morello's and Saeta's crews were arrested throughout the city. Damn, dude, it's like a whole crackdown.
All right.
Domenico Milone was arrested in a grocery store at East 97th Street. Antonio Lobedo, Frank Colombo, Giuseppe Mercurio, and Luciano Matti were among the others that were snagged up by the police.
Failure communication within the New York City Police Department delayed the arrest of Saeta on the Highland, New York, counterfeiting charges. November 18, 1999, just 3 days after the arrest of Morello and his gang, Saeta was arrested for extorting a man named Manzella, a Manhattan store owner, who claimed Saeta had ruined his business. On November 22nd, Manzella, not surprisingly, got cold feet and refused to appear in court. The Manzella case was dropped, but Saeta was immediately arrested under a bench warrant dated April 21st that charged him with being in possession of counterfeit money way back in 1902.
How the hell would they know?
Right. The bail was set at $5,000, which he immediately posted.
Of course, in counterfeit.
Right. As a result, Saeta walked out of court a free man. When the New York City Police Department finally got their communication wires uncrossed, they realized they had their man in the clutches, but let
Oh
him
my gosh, they
escape.
didn't even know that it was him that they needed.
They're like, what?
What a bunch of idiots.
He was just here.
Dude.
No.
On November 26th, the New York City Police Department issued an internal proclamation saying that any officer who could arrest Saeta in connection with the Morello counterfeiting case would immediately be made first-grade detective. Wow. As it turned out, because of unrelated case of piano theft, Saeta fell right into Flynn's hands. Uh-oh. What's he doing?
Well, this very piano was stolen in Hoboken, New Jersey by a man described as an Italian immigrant. This man was traced to a home at 8804 Bay 16th Street in Bath Beach, Brooklyn.
Why?
When the police arrived there, lo and behold, guess what? Old Saeta was chilling. He rented the house under the name of Joe Lopresti. Lupo the Wolf was arrested, along with fellow counterfeiter Giuseppe Palermo. When the police searched the house, they discovered a loaded revolver, black hand letters, phony passports, 3 bank books under the names of John Lupo, Joseph Lopresti, and Giuseppe Lopresti.
Jeez. Saeta, realizing he should have used the phony passports while they had a chance to escape the country, offered the arresting officer a $100 bribe. Of course, the officer refused it, but received his promotion to first-grade detective. Yeah, he's going to make more than that.
All right.
Counterfeiting trial commenced on January 26, 1910 in a federal courthouse on Houston Street. The judge was the Honorable Judge George Ray, and there were 8 total defendants, including the stars of the show, Joe Morello, Ignacio Saeta. They were represented by attorney Maribel Towns, who was born in Alabama and went to law school in Atlanta.
60 witnesses, all put forth by the state, but main witnesses against the counterfeiters was a timid little man named Antonio Camito, who was kidnapped by the Black Handers and all along with his wife was forced to do actual printing of the counterfeit bills in Highland.
Oh, jeez.
Camito told the
You
court...
couldn't just have one of your mafia guys do that?
Right. Camito told the court that he and his wife printed $46,000 worth of counterfeit bills. Camito also said that when New York City Police Lieutenant Joseph Petrosino was moited, Saeta had commented, "We did a fine job for Petrosino." That's hearsay, though.
Right.
You can't do anything with that.
Trial came to its conclusion on February 9th, 1910, and it took the jury only 1.5 hours to come back with 8 guilty verdicts.
Wow.
When it came to the sentencing, the real theatrics began. Morello was the first defendant called before the judge for sentencing. According to published reports, Morello, quote-unquote, was cringing before the judge. He held out his left hand, deformed from birth, for the inspection of Judge Ray. This was the hand Morello was adverse to showing to the jury that had tried him. He said he was the father of a family, and if the dear court would only suspend the sentence, he would go to Italy at once.
At once.
But Judge Ray told Morello that he might serve 15 years and pay a fine of $500 on the first count against him and serve 10 years, pay another $5 on the second count against him. Morello didn't wait for the interpreter to tell him about it. He said, he dropped into a faint and had to be picked up and was carried to the pen by the deputies. What a bitch! Big bad Lupo the Wolf was next. Newspaper report said, was Lupo the brave and nervy criminal that he had been supposed? Not for a moment. He began to weep before he reached the bar, and by the time Judge Ray had finished asking him what he had to say, he had used up one whole handkerchief with his tears. Oh my gosh, his thick, fat body shook with emotion as he told the court how the murder charge against him in Italy was all wrong, and he had been hounded by the police of 2 countries.
Judge Ray told Lupo as he was sobbing that he had passed sentence onto himself as to the old murder case when he fled from Italy instead of standing trial.
Right.
Judge says, I believe you and Morello were at the head of this undertaking. You have been convicted. I sentence you 15 years. Fine of $500 on the first count, 15 years, and a similar fine on the second count. Similar. And he says, said the court. And Lupo was led back to finish his weeping in private.
Wow.
When the other 6 men had been sentenced by Judge Ray, the 8 men were given a total of 150 years of prison. Sentencing of Syed and Morello effectively ended the Black Hand extortion letter scheme in America once and for all. These guys didn't know how to run from jail.
Right after old Giuseppe ends up in jail for his little counterfeiting schemes, his brothers, the Terranovas, Vincenzo and Ciro, and Nicholas Morello takes over for him.
Yeah, I bet they wish they went to jail.
And then they become a part of what's been known as the Mafia War, which took place in 1915 to 1917. One side, obviously, was the Morello crime family of Manhattan. On the other side were gangs originally from Naples and the surrounding Campania region, based in Navy Street in Brooklyn and Coney Island, referred to as the Camorra. Vincenzo and Nicholas occasionally used their older half-brother's name, Morello, even though they were legally Terranovas. They controlled Harlem and most of northern Manhattan. Morello and his allies were part of the traditional Sicilian Mafia.
The Camorra organization, run by Andrea Ricci, was a powerful underworld force in Brooklyn. Unlike the Mafia, though, the Camorra drew its recruits from immigrants from the Naples region of Italy. The Camorra organization close allies included the Navy Street and the Coney Island gangs of Brooklyn. We all know about the Coney Island guys, both of which were Neapolitan in origin. Leopoldo Laurentano, and Alessandro Valero headed the Navy Street gang. Palingro Morano was the boss of the Coney Island gang. Look, there's only one boss there. There's like, you guys got 2. And now you had Giuseppe that was running the Morello. And now you got like, what, 3 different people?
3 of his brothers, yeah.
Ridiculous. Before this conflict started, relations between the 2 sides were relatively amicable. In fact, each year the Morellos would attend a smoker held by the Camorra boss, Ricci, in Brooklyn. I mean, so they're cordial. Yeah. Good stuff. However, things were soon to change, which is Giuseppe behind bars.
Right. Now they're like, power grab.
Mm-hmm.
As with many gang conflicts, the Mafia Camorra War started due to greed. In this case, the Morello ambition to control gambling in Manhattan. The Morello's first target was the Del Gaudio brothers, who controlled gambling operations in East Harlem. Then they killed Niccolo Del Gaudio and cowed his brother Gaetano, which means, bye, get out of here.
Right.
Their next target, Joseph DeMarco, would be much harder to subdue, though. DeMarco ran a restaurant and several gambling establishments on Mulberry Street in Lower Manhattan. Having faced the Morellos before, he had survived 2 assassination attempts and had unsuccessfully tried to murder Nicholas Morello on one occasion.
Uh-oh.
The Morello family decided to seek help from the Navy Street and Coney Island gangs to subdue DeMarco.
June 24th, 1916, the Morellos met with Navy Street and Coney Island gangs in Coney Island. The reason for the meeting was to parcel out control of all illegal activities in New York, including gambling, drugs, and extortion. At this very meeting, Nick Morello and his associate, Steve LaSalle, proposed killing DeMarco. Well, the 2 Brooklyn gangs agreed, and Loretano, the Navy Street boss, set up a meeting at the Brooklyn Cafe to plan the hit. 3 weeks after that, Nick Morello and his associate, Steve, and Ciro of the Artichoke Gang Terranova, and Giuseppe Verrazzano met the Brooklyn gang members at Loretano's Cafe. The main problem in this staging an attack on DeMarco was that he knew all the Morellos, and he wouldn't let them even get close to him. They're like, are you kidding me?
Stupid, you better get out of here.
However, Verrazzano, he was like, hey, dude, I'm a very close friend of DeMarco. And he was like, I can set up the trap, everything. He won't even suspect a thing.
Right.
Everybody was like, you know what?
It's a good idea.
So the plan was for Verrazzano to smuggle a Navy Street hitman into DeMarco's gambling den and point out DeMarco to the assassin. You think it would be easy to do that? And the assassin should kill him.
Well, that first attempt at killing DeMarco failed when Navy Street hitman John Fetto arrived late at the gambling den, and by that point, DeMarco had left already.
Jeez.
Complicated in the planning for a second attempt, the conspirators found out that a friend of DeMarco, who was Joe Chuck Nazaro, would accompany DeMarco that afternoon. Oh. To increase their chances of success, John Esposito was added to the hit team.
Jeez.
That afternoon, Esposito and Fetto made their way to a saloon on Elizabeth Street to await a signal from Verrazzano. Around 5 o'clock, Verrazzano arrived at the saloon and notified the gunmen that DeMarco had arrived at the gambling den.
Uh-oh.
Said it's on now. Verrazzano and the 2 hitmen left the saloon and made their way to the entrance of the gambling den. Don't screw it up this time, guys.
Well, Verrazzano, Esposito, Fetto, they all arrived at the entrance to DeMarco's gambling hall. Nick Sassy, a DeMarco employee who was a Navy Street sympathizer, got the three men past the doorman and inside the hall. The men walked to the back bedroom where the card games were going on. Inside the back bedroom, DeMarco, Charles Lombardi, and other gangsters, and others, there's others,
Right.
and numerous spectators were watching the card game. To identify the target for Esposito and Fede Verrazano sat down opposite of DeMarco. Outside the room, Sassy and Rocco Valente from Navy Street were standing watch to make sure everyone had a clear escape route.
Well, suddenly Esposito pulled out his gun and fatally shot Lombardi.
Oh, no.
The nervous gunman had misread the signals from Verrazano and thought he was shooting DeMarco.
Oh, jeez.
Working quickly, Verrazano managed to kill DeMarco himself, though. So you should just done it yourself.
Right.
The Navy Street gunmen then crawled out of the bedroom window on Oliver Street and safely made their escape. Jeez. Why didn't they just go out the door? That evening, Nick and Vincent Morello, LaSalle, Terranova, and Verrazano all traveled to the Navy Street gang headquarters. Well, they advised Loretano that Joe DeMarco was indeed dead.
Yeah, but the plan screwed up and everybody's seen what happened.
They've seen Verrazano's the one that did it.
Yeah, they were like, Verrazano was supposed to be like, oh, sure, I didn't know that shit was happening.
Exactly. Screwed himself.
Yeah.
Well, they gave Loretano $50, which is equivalent to $1,245 in today's money, and they said, pass this on to your gunmen.
The gunman's like, what's this shit?
They get like $10.
Right.
It's still a couple hundred, though, right?
Whatever. Well, with the death of Joe DeMarco, the Morello organization was able to open up Lower Manhattan, and they did that with their gambling operations and all their other shit. However, to the Morello's chagrin, the Camaro organization also grabbed the opportunity and opened up a couple of their own gambling houses in Lower Manhattan. Since the Morello goal had been a monopoly on gambling in the area, the stage was set for conflict.
Yeah.
On the other side of the East River, Neapolitan gangs were also getting ambitious. Alessandro Valero, a top Navy Street leader, had never been happy with cooperating with the Morellos on the DeMarco hit. Yeah, because he really didn't say too much, huh? He now decided to break their alliance.
Uh-oh.
He's like, there's so much trouble here. So they held a meeting in Philadelphia between Navy gang representatives and the Camaro leadership about hitting the Morellos and taking complete control of Manhattan. After discussing it with Camaro boss Ricci, the two groups agreed to an alliance. Wow. The Navy gang and the Camaro, so the other guys ain't there.
Not the Coney Island, no.
Right. The Navy gang and the Camaro developed a plan to lure the leaders of the Morello gang to another meeting in Brooklyn, only to ambush and moiter them.
Well, September 7, 1916, Nicholas Morello and Charles Ubriaco were lured into a trap while being invited to a chat with Marano and Navy Street gang boss Loretano. Also, Loretano's in on it now, too, huh?
I guess he would have to be.
Terranova and Ubriaco were shot and killed.
Jeez.
Well, that's Nicholas Morello. Subsequently, they went after other East Harlem gang leaders, killing Giuseppe Verrazano, or she's gone, at Joseph Conni's Italian Gardens restaurant at 341 Broome Street on October 6, 1916, but were unable to reach the Morellos, who stayed close to their house in East 116th Street. Well, they got one of them.
Right.
The Neapolitans did not fear police investigations because obviously they had paid off police officers, and omerta prevented witnesses to step forward. However, though, 1917 in May 1917, Ralph Daniello, a.k.a. the Barber, a member of the Navy Street gang who had been present at the meetings, began to tell the police everything he knew about Marano, the Neapolitan gangs, and the recent murders.
Giuseppe Verrazano, who was with the Morello gang, wanted to open up another gambling house. This was not liked by the Navy Street gang, so a plot to kill him was hatched. Verrazano spotted a Navy Street member and tried to kill him, but he was spotted and forced to flee.
Ooh.
Many assassinations and attempts happened after this, making neither side safe. Since the Camorra could not kill the new leaders, their plot for destruction would have to be executed indirectly. The Camorra tried to take the artichoke business from Ciro Terranova.
You can't take the artichoke business from somebody that calls themselves the Artichoke King,
There's
dude.
no freaking way. Their threats failed, not only against artichokes, but coal, ice, and other markets.
Members killed in this war included Salvatore DeMarco, George Esposito. Oh, Esposito got his shit, huh? Gaetano Del Gaudio, Antonio Tony the Shoemaker Peretti, and Joseph Chuck Nazaro. The man who played the biggest part in the victory of the Mafia was Ralph the Barber Daniello, who testified against Navy Street's activities from murders to rackets, leading to numerous convictions and indictments. The Camorra boss, Andrea Ricci, was shot dead in November 1917, allegedly by his own men, as they were afraid he could testify. Damn.
Rocco Valente was arrested in January for participation in the DeMarco Lombardi killing. He was jailed for 10 months before being discharged in November 1918. He appeared later in court to testify against Charles Giordano in March of 1919.
Good for him, I guess.
Alessandro Valero was tried for first-degree moita in the case of Nicholas Morello and Charles Ubriaco. Ralph Daniello testified against Valero and stated the gang paid money to a detective named Michael Miali. Miali was reduced in rank and assigned to patrol duty.
Damn, they didn't even fire him, though, for taking gang money, dude.
That's even worse. You put him on patrol.
Right, so now he's in with the rest of the guys that are on patrol for the mob and stuff.
Right.
Like,
that's a stupidity.
Jeez.
Well, after all this, Judge Capper was taken ill on February 18th, causing a mistrial declaration.
Oh, jeez.
Valera was retried on the 4th of March and was sentenced to life at Sing Sing.
All right. Well, Pellegrino Morano, leader of the Coney Island faction, was convicted of murder in the second degree. He was sentenced to 20 to life at Sing Sing. Alfonso Segoria, a Navy Street gang member, was sentenced on June 17, 1918. He received 12 years in Dannemora for the Nick Morello case. Well, he testified his fellow assailants and received he testified against his fellow assailants and received a shorter prison sentence and deportation to Italy.
I don't know if he wanted to go to Italy, though.
Maybe. Justice for Morello's and Ubriaco's death did not stop there, though. John Esposito and Antonio Notaro were sentenced in June 1918 from 6 to 10 years each for their participation. Ciro Terranova was tried for complicity in June of 1918 with connection with the DeMarco Lombardi killing.
Wow, there goes all of that.
Oh.
Well, Johnny Esposito, the killer of Lombardi, tried to testify against Terranova, but once it was proved that they were in the same gang, Sarah was acquitted due to lack of corroboration. Wow. Isn't that crazy? Dang. Esposito, you dirty rat.
Right.
Ralph Daniello's sentence was suspended due to testimony he had given. An assault which cost him 5 years in Coney Island cut short his freedom.
Idiot.
Yep. So he assaulted somebody in Coney Island when we got
After he got off on these charges, then he goes and beats somebody up and goes to 5 years.
Idiot. After his release in 1925, he was found shot. Obviously,
Of course.
Surprised he even made it out of prison.
Right.
He was found shot.
Well, how many mafia guys are in prison now?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And they say that one guy that we talked about on the last episode, that was the first made man. Well, I guess he was the first made man to testify against the mob, but we're seeing it already in the 1918s
Right.
and
These
shit.
dudes are cracking like crazy.
Right.
Yeah, maybe that's why I just went with the Sicilians.
And a made man, you can only,
Right. Oh. Anyway, he was found shot to death after he was released in 1925 near Metuchen, New Jersey. Sorry, New Jerseyans, if that's wrong, but whatever.
Don't care.
Fink Favola was found guilty by Judge Tompkins for the moida of Chuck Nazaro in 1917. Favola was sentenced to death at Sing Sing. The testimony having been given by someone who may have been closer to him than anyone, his very own wife.
Damn.
I thought it wasn't illegal yet.
Nope.
However, on the 14th of April 1922, notice was served on District Attorney Weeks that a motion would be made to grant a retrial on the case of Favola.
All previous statements were withdrawn by his wife.
Oh.
The explanation being that the police had threatened and bribed her to testify. Maybe, right?
Right.
Why would she do it anyways? What a cunt.
And then Favola was just like, do it, babe. Just do
Maybe,
it.
right. The retrial was opposed by mocking the affidavit of Tessie Favola. Tompkins denied any form of retrial for Favola, though.
Oh.
At last-minute attempt to save Favola was made by lawyer Thomas O'Neill on May 29, 1923. 7 hours till execution. Tompkins was granted a retrial, sparing him until October 7th. Well, his death sentence was eventually commuted.
Hey.
Tony Peretti, though, he received a death sentence for his part in the killing of Nicholas Morello and Charles Ubriaco on September 7th, 1916. And both of these guys were also involved in the murder of Joe Nazaro.
Right.
Leading to his execution, security in Sing Sing prison was enhanced from 16 hours a day to 24 hours a day.
Oh.
They're like,
Yeah.
ain't nobody breaking out of here. He was pressuring politicians to deny the death penalty, but this was not granted. And he was electrocuted on February 17th, 1927 at the age of 35.
They're like, dude, we can't let everybody off.
Right, somebody's got to pay for this shit.
And it just happens to be you.
Yeah, and that's all while Giuseppe's in prison.
Right. Giuseppe's like, what the hell?
But it don't stop for Morello because he gets out, but things ain't the same. Newly released from the federal penitentiary in Atlanta, and we sent him to Atlanta in 1920, and trying to retake control of his empire, Morello found himself considered a threat to his former captain, now turned mafia boss Salvatore D'Aquila,
Oh, wow. You know how that goes.
who, within a year of Morello's release, ordered Morello killed.
You already knew that.
Yep, got to get him out of the way. He ain't going to come back and try to take back over.
Morello, along with a number of others now under orders of the death by D'Aquila, fled to Sicily for a spell.
For a little bit.
Hey, I would go there and talk to the higher ups.
Well,
see what you can get some meetings with somebody and be like, hey, what's going on?
It's been how many years now? Or are they still wanted for the murder and shit?
Morello, along with a number of others, now under orders of death by D'Aquila, fled to Sicily. One of these men,
Sicily.
Sicily. One of these men, a former tequila gunman, Umberto Valente. He went after Morello and his chief protector and ally, Giuseppe Morello, in order to regain the favor of tequila. He's like, I got to get back in this good guy's grace. A war ensued, and after much violence and some prominent deaths among the mafioso involved, Valente was murdered by Masserea's gunmen. Some say it was Lucky Luciano who did that. That was in August 1922. With Valente gone, D'Aquila's power began to lose its luster of invulnerability. Morello, sensing his time to rule had passed and the power of Masseria was on the rise, became consigliere, or what? Underboss?
This right-hand man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the right-hand man guy. Right-hand man guy. He became the consigliere to Masseria and prospered under him throughout the Prohibition years of the 1920s.
Well,
because he knew his place where it needed to be, right?
During the Castellammarese War between 1930 and 31, Masseria and Morello fought against a rival group based in Brooklyn, led by Salvatore Maranzano and Joseph Bonanno. Morello, an old hand at killing, became Masseria's war chief and strategic advisor. Well, unfortunately, one of the first victims of the war was Giuseppe Morello, as he was killed along with associate Joseph Periano, August 15, 1930, while collecting cash receipts in his East Harlem office.
Wow.
Joseph Valache, we heard about him in a little bit of the last episode, the first made man in the American Mafia to turn state's evidence, identified Morello's killer as Castellammarese gunman he knew as Buster from Chicago.
Oh, that was Buster from Chicago.
Whoever Buster from Chicago is, we don't know.
Damn, what a hell of a way to go out for Morello.
Right.
Didn't even know.
Well, he knew.
Right. It's bound to happen sometime.
Wow. It's all right. That's Giuseppe's little story, huh? Not really much, but, I mean, first guy.
Enough.
First guy, and, oh, geez, throughout this episode, we just got about 30 other people that we have episodes on.
Right.
Especially the Castellammarese War. Yeah, but we obviously have the Castellammarese War still. That's coming up pretty quick, though. But then we'll have Masseria's story, Maranzano's story. But I think next week we didn't really get into it for some reason in Giuseppe's story. But one of his main rivals in the early days when he first got there was the 5 Points Gang, which not really a mafia, but has something to do with mafia, as Lucky Luciano and Al Capone were both members of these guys before they went on and did their mafia stuff. But yeah, they feuded with the Morello gang for a minute there in New York, the 5 Points Gang, Paul Kelly. But he was it's a primarily Irish gang, but Paul Kelly was the founder and he was Italian, so I don't know, weird how it became Irish. But yeah, we'll probably have them, and then we got so much before the 5 Families is even formed. We got so much coming up. So yeah, that's gonna do it for Giuseppe Morello, the clutch hand and the first known mafioso to immigrate to America. How many people know that? Yeah, with that, we'll be back next week. Be sure to go check out Battles of the American Civil War. We'll cover the Civil War battle by battle. We're coming up quick on Gettysburg. A couple of episodes away from Gettysburg, actually. We just covered Vicksburg, just covered the Chancellorsville. A bunch of stuff happened in this last couple of weeks we just covered over there. And This Week in Sports History, if that's your thing, you like to learn about sports and history and sports history, there's that. And yeah, once again, we got our source for today's episode from the legendsofamerica.com and, of course, Wikipedia. So if you want to fact check us or anything like that, that's where we got most of our info. And, the Mafia, what is it called? It's called like mafia.org or something like that. It's cool with a website. It's hard to find stuff on, especially like Giuseppe Morello. There wasn't really, you go to any of these websites, they really didn't.
Right.
And people are always like, oh, the Wikipedia's not credible. Go to any Wikipedia article, and then you go to any other article like Civil War .org or whatever, or Civil War Timeline or whatever. Right. It's mostly shit taken from Wikipedia that they're just repeating on their website. So Wikipedia, that's why you just search other websites. If it's on other websites and that are reputable, Wikipedia is good. With that being said, we'll be back next week for the 5 Points Gang and some more mafioso killings and moitas and extortion and all that good stuff.
It's going to be
fun. Sure is. Only getting started here on the Outlaws and Gunslingers podcast with the Mouth of Michiganders with
bang.
yeah.